guys, Earshot here with another Pro Tools 10 tutorial, and today we will be discussing editing. Now this is a two-part video tutorial, so please, if you guys don't get anything out of this side, watch the second side, and at the beginning of the tutorials I will be telling you guys what the objectives are. So in this first tutorial, part 1, we will be discussing alternate trim, selector, and grabber tools, the smart tool, and the use of strip silence. So let's go ahead and dig in here, guys. We'll start with the trim tool, the selector tool, and the grabber tool, excuse me. So all your tools in Pro Tools are at the top here, and we have different tools. Here's your zoom tool, your trim tool, your selector, grabber, your scrubber, and your pencil. This is for automation and stuff. Now these can all be used individually from F1 through I want to say 10. Yes, F1 through F10. You can select the different tools in Pro Tools. In fact, I should say F5 through F10. You can select the different tools in Pro Tools, as you see I'm doing right now. That's F5, that's F6, F7, F8, F9, and F10. The different editing modes over here are F1 through F4, so let's stick to grid mode for now. And so let's talk about the trim tool, which is F6. Now the trim tool, if you hover over it and select it, can become different tools. Can become a time compression and expansion tool. So let's select that, and you can see the cursor change to this little time cursor here. And if I get next to an audio file, it turns into a little like C, a backward C, depending on where you're selecting your audio here. Now if I select this and bring it over, the trim operation cannot be performed because the track you have selected contains a fade on the clip. Gotta remove my fade here. Yeah, so you can't do this with a fade. Let's go ahead and just let's go back to the standard tool first. Let's go back to the smart tool, select this, and let's go big boy on here. The way I did that was I just hit E on my keyboard. I had to make sure that this little A through Z is selected over here, and I could configure the zoom option in my Pro Tools preferences. If you go to preferences, editing, and over here zoom toggle, this is the little zoom toggle button over here. If you select it, the track height, make it jumbo, and leave the bottom one, track view, last used. You can jump back and forth from jumbo's height to small height by having this selected. I'm pressing E right now and it's not doing it, so you have to have this selected. Okay, so back to the grabber tool here. In standard mode, the grabber tool, you guys know, it just shortens clips. According right now, I'm on the grid. If it doesn't, if I'm not on the grid, it doesn't do it on the grid. So let's keep the grid. Right now I'm on one whole bar, so it's chopping a bar every time I go down, etc., etc., expanding it to the left when I move to the left. Now that's the standard tool. You can use it on the other side of an audio file, etc., to edit and make it clip longer or shorter. So that's how you would use that to edit files, audio files in Pro Tools. That's the standard trim tool. So let's go to the time compression and expansion. What this does, it just makes my clip longer or shorter. And of course, when you make a clip shorter, let's solo this. Let's undo it actually. This is how it sounds normally. Let's click back to convinced you. So that's the normal sound, or I should say recording there. I said convince you. That was a normal recording. What with the expansion tool, right? If you shorten this, it becomes faster. So let's select here.
Convinced you
If you notice that, it became faster. And back here,
of your love.
and we can make it slower too by making it bigger. Let's go back to this.
Convinced you of your love.
You notice there it made these, stretched it out pretty much. That's what the expansion trim tool is doing. It's expanding the time, compressing the time, making things faster as they go in, longer as they go out. Now, as you heard in the recordings though, using this tool, I don't use it very often. It puts artifacts in your recordings. So the best way to do that, if you're trying to make a clip longer or shorter, is probably just using elastic audio, excuse me, not quantization. And just choose monophonic here for voices, and it'll process. As you can see, the little green dot here or square will come up, and make sure you change this to tick based so that when you adjust your audio track, it stays in time. So that's how you do that. And if you do a big change, give me a second here. Standard. Yeah, so if you do a big change, the elastic audio will process this, and it will sound a lot smoother than the time compression and expansion tool that we were just using. So let's change this back to monophonic. Let's change this back to non-disable elastic audio. Revert back to the original, and we have our original track here. Now back to the trim tool. You have another neat little tool that comes with, and this is the loop tool. Notice that the icon changed again. Instead of a time with a C in the middle, it has a time clock with a C in the middle. It's a C with a little arrow facing to the left, or to the left is facing the arrow changes. Just the C changes, excuse me. And this, what it does, it just loops whatever you want to loop in your session. So let's go back to F6, and as you notice, let's make this smaller, it's looping this track over and over again. This is the beginning here, and this is the beginning here of the track. And if you notice, you can tell if your audio track is looped because there will be little arrows at the bottom of each region, if you will. Because if I were to split this right here, this is the end of this whole entire section here, and this is the end of this whole entire section here. So it puts a little arrow at the end of the section and where you're looping. So if you keep continuing, you can do this until as long as you want, and that's a quick way to loop something in Pro Tools using your loop trim tool. So now we have, let's jump to the grabber tool here. This also has different options here. The normal one is just a grabber tool which you can just use to select regions and move things around, etc., etc. You can select multiple by holding shift. Just gotta make sure you select the fades too, and then you can move all these at once without having to group a track. So that's how you would do that quickly without grouping a track. Let's make this smaller again. Actually, let's keep it pretty big. Make this medium. Zoom out a tad bit. So that's your grabber tool, the normal use of it. And here's your grabber separation tool. Well, give me a second here. Why isn't it? Do I have to have a selection? I see what it's doing. Give me a second, guys. Let's name this audio whatever, and click OK. Audio whatever. Okay. So that's what that does. What it does is you can highlight a clip. Let's make this bigger actually. And it's not really then grabber tool. Supposed to be able to separate these, but for whatever reason it's not letting me. Give me a second while I figure this out, guys. There it goes. Alright. I thought I had to have a selection. Sorry about that, guys. So in order to separate, let's say this little region like I just did, let's undo this so I can show you guys the whole process. Your grabber tool, I do this a different way, but you can use it. You can use your grabber tool. As you can see, it changes the icon again as long as you're hovering over a region or audio file. And it's a little grabber tool with some scissors on it. So with a selection already made to this audio file, and if you go to F8 to your grabber tool with the selection on it, you have to have this separation clicked. What you can do is just move it over and it separates it. To me, that's kind of time consuming. I mean, but if you prefer that way, I guess you can do it that way. But you know, using two tools, you know, very quickly like that, just switching from F7 to F8, you know what I mean, and separating things quickly, you can do that. So that's how you use the grabber tool in separation mode to separate regions. Me, I would just use my favorite, which we are going to discuss next, and that is the Smart Tool. The Smart Tool, let's make these original. The Smart Tool is operational by pressing two tool buttons at the same time on your keyboard. So if you press F5 and F6 at the same time, or I should say F6 and F7 at the same time, notice what it does up here. It highlights, let's do it one more time. It highlights all three of these tools all at once. So all these tools are now operational depending on how you approach your audio region here. So right now the grabber tool is active, as you can see, and the selector tool becomes active if I come closer to, as you can see, this grid value right here. So that's one bar I just highlighted. And the grabber tool, I can move, get closer to a grid value, I can select. Now if you go to the top right of a region, I can fade, obviously. Top bottom, I can trim that fade accordingly. So let's delete that fade though, and I can trim here accordingly. Let's move this back. So the Smart Tool, and we're missing one, aren't we? No, the Selector Tool, the Trim Tool. It's bringing that little arrow up because it's still in loop right here. So if I were to just undo this, well, I already changed it, so let's move to this top one up here. Let's disable that. So yeah, so see how it doesn't have the arrow now, because down here it was already as a looped file, and I renamed it and everything, so it created a different file when I renamed it in my clips window there, and in my hard drive as well. So as you can see here, you can edit, trim it, you can select it, and you can grab it all at the same time. So the Smart Tool is the best way to go when using Pro Tools, in my opinion. Unfortunately, the zoom tool and the scrubber tool and the pencil tool are not involved in the smart tool. But I mean, these three tools are what you're going to be utilizing the most in Pro Tools to make edits accordingly. Um, um, like, let's say you're recording a session with drums and you're recording live, etc., etc. The best way to edit is in the smart tool, using the smart tool and making sure that your lick timeline and edit selection is not active, so that way you can make edits while the recording is still happening. So you can do, like, you can fade, etc., etc. Make your little minute edits while it's recording, so that way later you don't have to do as much. So let's click this back. Okay, guys. Now we talked about the trim tool. It's different little options here. It has the standard use. You can just select. I don't know why. Oh yeah, that's the trim tool. You can not select, but trim down audio regions. Your time compression expansion. You can make things bigger. It has a fade in it somewhere. There it is. Let's delete that. You can make it bigger, which makes it slower in time. Make it smaller, which makes it quicker in time. Let's undo that. Undo one more time. Your loop tool, which loops, as we saw down here. Just going through these steps again for you guys. Remember, it brings the little arrows when you loop down here, so you know it's a looped audio file. Standard. Your selection tool. Now remember, these can all be selected separately using your keyboard. F5 through F10. F6 through F10, I should say. Well, F5 through F10 if you count the zoom tool and the pencil tool and the scrubber tool. Now, we discussed grabber tool already. So let's talk about strip silence here, because that's our last objective here. We talked about trim, selector, grabber, the smart tool, which is all three of them combined, and you can access that by pressing F6 and F7 at the same time, or F7 and F8 at the same time, etc., etc. And that becomes active that way. The best tool to use is definitely the smart tool, guys, for editing in Pro Tools. Now let's talk about some strip silence, because this is another editing technique here that we can use. And the way to do strip silence in Pro Tools, it's pretty much just go to edit, or you can just do the shortcut Command U, but edit, strip silence, and it brings up this little strip silence window here. And I think I have this on a different tutorial, but I mentioned it again here just for the heck of it for you guys. And you can adjust the threshold, which brings more markers here for you to adjust and make a more accurate representation of what's in the silence. And you just hit strip, and as you can see, if we zoom in here, strip the silence. And because I didn't make enough adjustments, some of the audio files got stripped as well. But again, if you exit that out, you can just drag back with the trim tool and you'll have your audio back. So that's pretty much some basic editing in here, or really you can say basic editing in Pro Tools. But these techniques are used all the time, so technically they're advanced as well. If you use them for a long time, you can use them in advanced ways. So again, let's highlight. We talked about the trim tool and its different modes, the selector tool and the grabber tool and its different modes, and all three, which is called the smart tool, and how they are accessible in an audio file all at once to make edits in Pro Tool and Pro Tools. And we did some strip silence, which gets rid of the silence in the audio file. If you guys want to use that, Command U on a Mac is how you do that. I think it's Control U on a PC. So I hope you guys learned something again. This is Earshock. If you didn't subscribe already to my tutorials for Pro Tools, make sure you do so. And there's a part 2, so make sure you guys view the part 2 to learn about insert time and cut time operations, region alignments, and nudging options. So those are other editing techniques that you can use in Pro Tools to edit your sessions. Earshock out.